4:20 on a Tuesday, as we typically and always do throughout the NFL season. We welcome in our good friend, John McMullen, Johnny Mac, who joins us Football on the 20s to break down everything that is Philadelphia Eagles-esque, and, of course, the NFL. Another weekend in the books, another no-show by my New York Football Giants, and a win by the Philadelphia Eagles, who are now, Johnny Mac, sitting pretty when we talk about the playoffs.
Yeah, which is, who knows? We'll see as the week goes on. You never know who's going to play now in the NFL from day to day, never mind week to week, with all these spike in COVID protocols. And it's not fun, to be honest. You watch that New Orleans team in the middle of a playoff hunt, just unable to even field any kind of competitive atmosphere. Washington on Tuesday, that was essentially a play-in game. The winner of that game between the Eagles and Washington had a good chance of going to the playoffs. The loser was essentially, not mathematically, but essentially was going to be eliminated. They weren't able to field a competitive team. It's depressing, to be honest. It's not fun to watch. It's not fun football. But the Eagles have taken advantage of it, and they deserve credit for that. But, that's a nice gift to get Garrett Gilbert and Jake Fromm in the same week. I don't think I've ever seen worse quarterback play than when I saw it from Jake Fromm. And I'm being serious. I've been covering this league for over 2 decades.
I got hammered because I was getting ready. I was prepping for the basketball game down here Sunday afternoon. So my eye was obviously watching the game, but I just, if it was any other day, I would have probably raked the leaves, to be quite honest with you. And I tweeted out, I've seen enough, go back to Glennon. And I was getting hammered. And then, of course, sure enough, they go back to Glennon. But it's just another example of sometimes how teams don't value the backup quarterback. They weren't winning that game, even at 3-3. It just wasn't happening. I'm listening to the game, too, on the radio, and it's so funny, a tale of two cities, right? Because if you listen to Merle, he didn't even add the fact that Fromm got drilled in the head. And then you listen to the fan, they're mentioning it with that pick that eventually turned the tide of the game. But the bottom line was this: the Giants stink. The Eagles did what they had to do. And everyone who's sitting there saying, well, look at the quarterbacks that you played. Look, if that's my team, if the Giants had to play the Fromms, the Glennons, the Gilberts, the whomevers of the world, and I'm winning these games, man, I'm not apologizing at all. It doesn't have to be aesthetically pleasing, man. Just get the W and move on.
Yeah, but I think there's a little difference between, look, the Giants, I'm not apologizing for that because their attrition was of their own accord. Somebody gets injured, that happens in the NFL. That's a part of the sport. And then you don't have a competent backup quarterback and Mike Glennon, and you try to bring somebody in off the Buffalo practice squad, and that's, they don't have the kid ready to play. Maybe he can play in the NFL down the road, but they just didn't have him ready to play. That, to me, is different than, say, what happened to New Orleans last night or what happened to the Washington football team. That, to me, is different, and that is not satisfying to me. Now, it's up to the fan. The fan can then be satisfied if they want. Again, it's not the Eagles' fault that the league has these policies, and that's the way it shook out. But, if it goes in a different direction next week or 2 weeks down the line, or God forbid, the playoffs, it's not going to be fun for them either. And, the NFL is probably going, in fact, they are going to make another shift in the policy and lower the quarantine time now that the CDC has done, and they can use that as sort of a crutch to try to keep as many players on the field as possible. So hopefully the playoffs are a little bit better. But I got to tell you, these certain teams, look, maybe the Eagles make the playoffs, maybe they don't. We'll use the NFC side. But New Orleans, Washington, we'll never know which one of those teams would have been the best team. And it's just, it's been it's been a bad couple weeks for this league, I would say.
It has, but you know this as much as I do. Come hell or high water, they're going to play these games. They're not going to risk it.
But, and that's why they're trying to fix everything as possible. Because the last thing you want is a high-profile quarterback or high-profile player being ruled out for a playoff game, and they're completely healthy and completely asymptomatic. I mean, that's tough to take for any city, for any fan, and that's what they're trying to avoid and trying to get to. I don't know if they can get there.
Yeah, when I look around the league, I mean, look, the Eagles kind of went back to running the football. Now, in your estimation, it is crazy. You've got Scott, Howard, Hurts, Sanders. I mean, Jalen Hurts has 14 less rushing yards than Miles Sanders. Sanders is not going to be able to go Sunday against Washington. It's almost like this running back by committee. I mean, it's crazy. I was looking at the stats and I was looking at the numbers. I mean, is it a product of the numbers that they're averaging over the last 2 months or so? Is that a product of the teams that they're playing can't stop the run? They have no run defense. Is that a product of how good their offensive line is, plus the players, or is it a little bit of both? Because I can't recall a stretch. I mean, you got to go back to the Bears of the heyday where they were running the ball crazy like this. I can't recall where it's almost like, hey, $160, $180, 200 yards. They're good for that every weekend.
Yeah, they 175 or more for 7 consecutive weeks, which was the first time since the 85 Bears. That'll tell you how long it's been. And the 85 Bears had Walter Payton.
Yep.
The Eagles don't have a running back like that. So first and foremost, it's the offensive line. But Jalen Hurts is a big part of it because the Eagles call it their +1 in the running game. Now, it's interesting that streak got broke against the Giants, mainly because the Giants figured out very early that Jalen's still dealing with that ankle injury, and the Eagles didn't want him running the football. So I thought Patrick Graham identified that early. I think the Giants actually did a very good job defensively in the first half until the floodgates opened, and then you were talking about business decisions. You know how this league works late in seasons. I mean, their season is over, and they're fighting and clawing for 30 minutes, and they're in the game, and all of a sudden you have that terrible interception. You're right, it should have been a personal foul on the Eagles. But even if it wasn't, they got the 15-yard penalty. They weren't scoring. They weren't doing anything, and that defense knew what they were dealing with on the offensive side of the ball. There was going to be no compliment. And the minute the Eagles scored, the game was essentially over. And that's how they felt. They kind of fell apart from there. So, but the Eagles are a really dominant running team because of the offensive line and the quarterback, not the running backs. They're good. They're fine.
Yeah. They're
nice players. But they're not, obviously, they're not Walter Payton level players. Few are. But, Miles Sanders is going to be out with a broken hand. Now, Jordan Howard has a stinger. We'll see if he's able to get back. So it might have to be Boston Scott and Kenny Gainwell. They'll even bring up maybe Jason Huntley from the practice squad. And they'll still be able to run the ball because of that offensive line. And as Jalen Hurts gets healthier, and he starts running the football again, it'll make him that much more effective.
Yeah, and I look at that Washington squad. I mean, look, you feel for him, right? But that game, what was it, 14-21 to nothing, 21 to 7, whatever, it was 28-7. I mean, you get the infighting, which is never a good thing, and we can talk about frustration boiling over. But again, if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, you kind of take advantage of a team that's sputtering a little bit, and they're dealing with a bunch of issues. I look at this game, and I feel like I'm repeating myself over the last several weeks. You want to get in the playoffs. You want to deservingly so earn a spot in the dance. Then you go on the road and you take care of business. And I just don't see Washington, after watching that game on Monday night, putting up any type of resistance because they've dropped 3 in a row. And, oh, by the way, all 3 of them have come against NFC East opponents. So, to me, I'm looking at this team. They're shot. They're done. The wheels have come off.
Yeah, I kind of agree, and it's one of those things where, same thing, as I said, that Tuesday night game was essentially a playoff game, and they had no chance because they had to start Garrett Gilbert, and from that point, they kind of know their season's over, and they're facing a very, very good team in Dallas. Dallas is really good, really talented, and they got blown out of the water, and yeah, I think it's at that point where you say they know that it's over, and especially if the Eagles get off to a good start. I think when you talk about these late season games, if you're out there on a Sunday or a game day and you start playing well and you start feeling it and the competitive juices get flowing, sometimes you see those types of upsets. But if you're down 2 scores, then you tend to check out. So I think if the Eagles jump on them early, I think it'll be over early. And there's a good chance the Eagles are in the playoffs in Week 18 more than matter, because all that needs to happen is they have to win. Minnesota has to lose to Green Bay, which obviously it's at Green Bay. That's going to happen. And then one of 2 things has to happen. San Francisco has to beat Houston, has to win. And the Texans are not a good football team, even though I give David Culley credit for somehow winning 4 games with that roster. But I expect San Francisco to win that game, or New Orleans has to lose to Carolina. And both of those teams are terrible at this point. And who knows who the Saints are going to have, but they don't have a quarterback. And you might argue Taysom Hill's not a quarterback, but he's a heck of a lot better than Ian Bulk. So only one of those 2 things have to happen. So there's a very good chance that the Eagles beat Washington. They won't even need Week 18 against the Cowboys.
What about this report that, and you maybe substantiate it, I want to go back, and then we'll move ahead, to Gardner Minshew requesting to start, and Sirianni shot him down?
Yeah, I don't think he requested to start. I think he went to the coach and he said, what do I have to do to push Jalen Hurts to be the starter of this team? And the coach essentially shut him down. He said, look, he's our starter. We're not looking for any competition. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Now, I think it's a worse thing when people don't want to compete. And I don't have a problem with him.
Much to do about that.
Asking. Yeah, I mean, that's, I got a kick out. I probably told you that kid from Canada, I always forget his name, went up to, the Vikings wanted to sign him to be Kirk Cousins' backup, and he went in there and said, I want to push him. I want to start for this team. And the Vikings are like, whoa. We don't want any of that. We just want you to sit in the corner and shut up.
Yeah.
And this is much different. Obviously, Gardner Minshew probably thinks, hey, I started more games than Jalen Hurts. I've had more success than Jalen Hurts. Why can't I be the starter? And you like that competitive juice about him. And then he played well against the Jets. He was probably feeling his oats. And Nick Sirianni probably said what we all said. Well, come on, Gardner, it's the Jets. Settle down.
That's a fair point.
And they went back to Jalen Hurts. But, it would have been interesting. It would have been far more interesting. Certainly Eagles fans wouldn't have liked it. It would have been far more interesting if Jalen returned and played poorly. But he didn't. He's played, for the most part, pretty well, except for that first half. Against the Giants, and he was able to recover and played a very good second half.
John, when you look at, and let's stick with just the NFC side of the ball for a moment, Green Bay, Dallas, the Rams, Tampa Bay. I don't want to throw Arizona out there because I see a lot of things I don't like, but you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, respectively, Packers, Cowboys, Rams, Bucks. Do you really think home field advantage makes a difference?
Maybe in certain places, certainly Green Bay, if it's, 12 degrees, it does matter. For Dallas, I mean, one of the things, they built that beautiful stadium, and it is beautiful, and they really haven't had much of a home field advantage. It's almost too big in the fact that, I don't think you feel the crowd noise on top of you. So I think it depends on who's home field. But for the most part, if you're a good football team, you're going to be able to win anywhere if you bring your A game on that particular day. But there are certain places, Green Bay, Seattle, Kansas City, New Orleans, in which really the environment makes it very, very difficult at times.
Yeah, and that's, you mentioned Kansas City, and I'm looking at Kansas City. We've talked about them. We don't need to rehash it, but we loved them even they were 4-5. They've ripped off this great winning streak. I don't know why in the life of me I actually thought Pittsburgh had a snowball's chance in hell the other day. But, okay, you make your bet and then you got to lie in it. But how about Tennessee? How about the job that Grable's done? Because, look, I get it. You lose to the Steelers on the road. You come back. You have in a must-win situation against the 49ers, and you have 2 winnable games to get to 12 wins. Now, could be enough, perhaps, depending upon what happens when Indianapolis and Carson Wentz. But everyone talks about, Shanahan, and we talk about Kingsbury, and then Belichick, and whatever. To me, Grable's done a really good job because you lose that running back, and we just know as he went, so did the offense.
Yeah, no question. I mean, they've done a good job, but I look at that AFC, and I mean, if Kansas City's playing well, nobody's beating them. I don't see the NFC you mentioned. There's a number of teams. You can make an argument for Green Bay. You can make an argument for Dallas. You can even make an argument for the LA Rams. Tampa Bay, maybe not as much now because of all the injuries they've suffered recently, but obviously as the reigning Super Bowl champions, I'm with you. I don't think the Cardinals are ready, but there's more potential teams that could make a run in the NFC than the AFC. I mean, Kansas City would have to play really, really poorly to lose to any of these other top teams in the AFC. I mean, they would have to play their D game to lose to Buffalo or Tennessee or anybody else.
Yeah.
And they haven't played well as a whole, but obviously they get hot at the right time. They're so much more talented, and we'll see. Again, this year's tougher than any because we don't know who's going to play from week to week, who's going to be on the COVID list. But if they have Mahomes and Hill and Kelsey, they're not going to lose to any of those teams.
Yeah, just when I start to have a little confidence, or I want to buy into a team like Cincinnati, who, I mean, let's be honest, you're playing against a Baltimore team.
525 will do that for you.
Hey, listen, I'm a huge Burrow fan, and I'm a bigger Justin Herbert fan, and then I watched, the Chargers, and I'm like, oh my God, you're absolutely killing me. Like you want to buy into a team like that, but they're too skittish. They're too sporadic. Win 1, lose 2. Win 2, lose 3. I mean, what about Indianapolis? You think they can make it?
I mean, Carson Wentz is the quarterback. I have nothing against Carson, but they've done a nice job recovering.
So
and we'll see. They're going to change the rules again. They're probably going to change it today. It might have happened as we're on the air right now, but they're going to cut down the time from 10 days to 5 days for unvaccinated players. So who knows? Maybe Carson can be on the field this week. But if Jonathan Taylor goes for 200, I guess, on a given Sunday, but that's how they would have to win. The margin of error would be so small for that team. I do think if you're looking for somebody who could surprise, it would be that Cincinnati type or that Chargers type who can sling it all over the field. Right. And if they get hot on a particular afternoon, you never know what happens. But, that loss to the Texans, that's inexcusable.
And
then we talk about Brandon Staley. Like I've said for about 4 or 5 weeks now, Nick Sirianni is the best rookie head coach. And people say, what about Brandon Staley? I mean, the guy's got the best young quarterback in football. He's a defensive mind. And they're the 31st ranked defense in the NFL. That's not good. That's not good. If you're a defensive guy, you should be able to, even if you don't have the talent you want, you should be able to be up in that 16 to 20 range. And when you're down at 31, that's bad.
Yeah, I'll tell you a team that if, and it looks like they're not going to, they don't make the playoffs, they're going to go and they're going to look at 3 losses where in the offseason they're going to hammer the head coach. And that's Baltimore, right? 2 back-to-back on the road Steelers. Great play call. They didn't execute. The Browns lost it late. The Packers. And then you give up 41 against Cincinnati. Now, granted, you don't have Jackson out there, but they've dropped 4 straight. And that, in essence, has knocked them out of playoff contention. Now, I get it. The AFC North, it's still relatively tight with Cincinnati. But Baltimore, to me, is just they're going the opposite direction. And I'm just wondering if they don't make the playoffs, because I would imagine they got to win the AFC North to get in. You're going to look at some of those losses where they decided to go for too late.
Well, you're always going to, you're always going to, the Josh Johnson game, I can't blame that on Josh. I just can't. That's, it's similar to what we talked about with Ian Bolt and Derek Gilbert and Jake. I can't blame that on the head
Poor
coach,
guy.
period.
He's still in the league.
It's amazing. He's going to be Josh McCown. I hope he's got his daughter and a bunch of friends giving the 17 jersey picture because he's going to be up in that range soon. So that part, the 2-point stuff, analytics people run. So, they say it's the right thing to do. To me, a guy like John Harbaugh is just a really good coach, and you sort of chalked up this season as an outlier because of all the COVID issues, because the quarterback issues, he's not vaccinated, then injuries on top of it. So I do think that plays into it. It's really hard. If you're thinking about moving on from a coach, and they're in some of these games that you mentioned, and maybe you lose an unvaccinated star for a particular game, you're going to blame that on the coach?
No, you can't. You can't.
It's tough. It's tough to evaluate. And in the case of Harbaugh, he's just built up too much goodwill. He's getting a mulligan. There's no question about that.
Okay. No, that's fair enough. Fair enough. All right. He is Johnny Mac, John McMullen. He joins us every Tuesday throughout the football season, football on the 4s. Give him, football in the 20s, at 4 o'clock. Give him a follow on Twitter at JF McMullen, NFL Eagles Insider, SI Now, Philly Voice, Jacob Media, Birds 365 Show, 6 ABC. Every time I go through the list, I get tired. I'm like, oh, my God, this is exhausting. I got another...
Imagine how tired I am, Rich. Imagine.
Well, on that note, I won't hold you, pal. Listen... happy belated holidays. Happy New Year. Look forward to some good stuff in 2022, getting you on board, and appreciate everything you've done.
Hey, thank you, Rich. Appreciate it. Happy New Year.
You got it, pal. There you have it, our guy, Johnny Mac. All right, quick timeout, 4:43.
Automotive Map presents the Sports Flash, powered by the Score app on 1490 Sports Betting.